The platform was a chaos of footsteps and murmurs, a cold wind slicing through the evening air at the train station. Leela stood near the edge, clutching her tattered coat against the chill, her 5-year-old daughter, Mia, clinging to her side. The little girl's wide eyes darted around, taking in the blur of commuters, her small hand gripping a worn stuffed rabbit. Leela's face was drawn, her lips pressed into a thin line as she counted the coins in her palm for the third time, as if they might multiply. $3.27. Not enough for the train fare to get them to the shelter before it closed for the night. Her stomach twisted, not from hunger though that was there too, but from the weight of failing Mia again. She glanced at the departure board. 10 minutes until the last train. The shelter was a 40-minute ride, and if they missed it, they'd be sleeping on the street again. The thought made her chest tighten. Mia's tiny frame shivered against her, and Leela knelt, pulling her daughter's scarf tighter. "We're gonna be okay, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice cracking. Mia nodded, trusting, oblivious to the math that wasn't adding up in her mother's head. Leela stood, scanning the crowd for a ticket agent, hoping to beg for a leniency, but the booth was shuttered. Her eyes landed on a man standing a few feet away, leaning against a pillar, his face half hidden by the brim of a wool cap. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with a neatly trimmed beard and a long coat that looked too expensive for this grimy station. He was watching the crowd, but his gaze flickered to her, brief but deliberate. Something about him felt steady, like he belonged somewhere solid. Unlike her, desperation clawed at her throat. She didn't want to do ask a stranger for help, but Mia's small, cold hand in hers left no room for pride. She approached him, her steps hesitant, her voice barely above a whisper. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her cheeks burning. "I'm sorry, yeah, broken bar, I can't pay for our tickets. It's just me and my daughter, and we need to get to the shelter before it closes. I hate to ask, but a broken bar, could you spare a few dollars?" Her words tumbled out, raw and unsteady, and she braced for rejection, for the dismissive glance she'd seen too many times. The man turned to face her fully, his eyes a deep brown, sharp but not unkind. He didn't speak right away, just studied her, then Mia, who peeked out from behind her mother's leg. His silence stretched, and Leela's heart sank. She started to turn away, muttering, "Never mind, I'm sorry," when his voice stopped her. "How much do you need?" he asked, low and calm, like he was asking about the weather. Leela swallowed. $6, for 2 tickets. He nodded, reaching into his coat pocket. Her pulse quickened, expecting a few crumpled bills, but instead, he pulled out a sleek leather wallet. He didn't open it, just held it in his hand, his eyes still on her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Leela," she said, caught off guard. "This is Mia." He glanced at Mia again, and something softened in his expression. "I'm Thomas," he said, then paused, as if weighing something. "You're trying to get to the Hope Street shelter?" She nodded, surprised he knew the name. "Yeah, they've got a bed for us, but only if we get there by 9. He checked his watch, a simple motion that somehow felt deliberate. "You've got time," he said. "Come with me." Without waiting for her response, he started walking toward the ticket machine, his stride confident but not rushed. Leela hesitated, then followed, Mia's hand tight in hers. At the machine, he tapped the screen, selecting 2 tickets to Hope Street. The total flashed, $6. He slid a card from his wallet, paid, and handed her the tickets without ceremony. "Thank you," Leela said, her voice thick with relief. "A broken bar, I'll pay you back somehow." Thomas waved a hand, dismissing the idea. "Don't worry about it." He looked at Mia again, who was staring up at him with those big, curious eyes. "You take care of her," he said, his tone softer now. "That's enough." Leela nodded, tears pricking her eyes. She wanted to say more, to explain how much this meant, but the words wouldn't come. The train's arrival horn blared, and she hurried Mia toward the platform, clutching the tickets like a lifeline. As they boarded, she glanced back. Thomas was still there, watching them, his expression unreadable. She waved, a small gesture, and he nodded once before turning away, disappearing into the crowd. The train lurched forward, and Leela sank into a seat, pulling Mia onto her lap. The warmth of the carriage was a small mercy, and Mia's head nestled against her chest, already heavy with sleep. Leela stared at the tickets in her hand, her thumb tracing the printed letters. $6. It was nothing to some, but to her, it was everything tonight. She thought of Thomas, his quiet kindness, and wondered who he was. Just a good man in the right place at the right time, she figured. She didn't let herself dwell on it. Survival didn't leave room for daydreams. The train rattled through the city, lights flashing past the windows. Leela's mind churned with the usual worries: finding work, keeping Mia fed, staying one step ahead of eviction notices. She'd been a single mother since Mia's father walked out 3 years ago, leaving her with nothing but debt and a baby who deserved better. She clawed her way through temp jobs, late-night diner shifts, and endless applications, but the city was relentless, chewing up her savings and her hope. The shelter was a temporary fix, a place to regroup, but she needed a plan. She always needed a plan. Mia stirred, mumbling something about her rabbit. Leela kissed her forehead, whispering, "Sleep, baby, we're almost there." The shelter was bare bones, but it had heat, a bed, and a lock on the door. For tonight, that was enough. She didn't notice the man in the corner of the carriage, watching her from beneath his cap, his face obscured by shadows. He wasn't Thomas, but he'd seen their exchange at the station. He'd heard her mention the shelter, and he was taking notes. At Hope Street, Leela carried a dozing Mia off the train, her small body limp in her arms. The shelter was a squat brick building, its neon sign flickering. Inside, the air smelled of bleach and stale coffee. A tired woman at the desk checked them in, handing Leela a key to a shared room. "You're lucky," she said. "Last bed." Leela nodded, too exhausted to reply. The room was small, with 2 cots and a sink that dripped. She tucked Mia in, pulling the thin blanket up to her chin. As she sat on her own cot, the weight of the day settled over her. She thought of Thomas again, his steady voice, the way he hadn't made her feel small. She didn't know why he'd helped, but she was grateful. Sleep came slowly, her dreams fractured by the sound of trains and the fear of tomorrow. The next morning, Leela woke to Mia's soft humming, the little girl playing with her rabbit on the floor. The shelter served breakfast, a watery oatmeal and bruised appalesa, but it was food, and Leela made sure Mia ate every bite. She was sipping weak coffee when a staff member approached, holding an envelope. "This came for you," the woman said, frowning. "Someone dropped it off at the desk this morning." Leela took it, her name scrawled on the front in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a note and a thick stack of cash, hundreds of dollars, more than she'd seen in months. Her hand shook as she unfolded the note. "Leela, take this for you and Mia. No strings. Stay safe. A. Thomas." She stared at the words, her mind reeling. How had he known where to find her? Why would he do this? The shelter staff had no answers. The envelope had appeared at dawn. No explanation. She counted the money. $2,000. Enough for a deposit on a cheap apartment, for groceries, for breathing room. Her first instinct was to find Thomas, to thank him, to understand. But she had no way to reach him. The station was a sea of strangers, and he'd given her no last name, no contact. She tucked the envelope into her bag, her heart pounding. This wasn't just kindness, it was a lifeline, but something about it felt too big, too unreal, and a small voice in her head wondered if there was a catch. Over the next week, Leela used the money carefully. She secured a tiny studio apartment, just a single room with a hot plate, but it was theirs. She bought Mia new shoes, the first pair that wasn't second-hand. She even landed a part-time job at a laundromat, the owner unfazed by her spotty resume. Things were looking up, but the note stayed with her, tucked into her coat pocket like a talisman. She read it again and again, trying to piece together who Thomas was. A businessman, a philanthropist, just a man with a soft spot for struggling mothers. She didn't know, but she felt his shadow in every step she took toward stability. One evening, as she walked Mia home from the park, she noticed a man lingering across the street. He was tall, his face hidden by a hood, but he moved with purpose, watching her. She quickened her pace, pulling Mia closer. The next day, he was there again, outside the laundromat, his eyes tracking her through the window. Fear crept in, cold and sharp. She started checking locks twice, keeping Mia inside after dark. The money had changed everything. but it had also brought something else attention she hadn't asked for. On the 10th day, a letter arrived at the apartment. No return address, just her name in that same neat handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Leela, you're being watched. Be careful. A. Thomas." Her blood ran cold. She read it again, her hands trembling. Who was watching her? And how did Thomas know? She locked the door, checked the windows, and pulled Mia into her arms, her mind racing. The man who had saved her at the station wasn't just a kind stranger, he was something more, something she didn't understand. And now, she wasn't sure if she was safer because of him, or in more danger than ever. The city hummed with its usual indifference, but for Leela, every shadow held a threat. She kept the letter hidden, tucked inside her coat with the first note, as if proximity might unravel their meaning. Mia sensed her mother's tension, her chatter quieter, her grip on Leela's hand tighter. Leela tried to keep their routine steady: work at the laundromat, walks to the park, bedtime stories, but her eyes were always scanning now, catching on every stranger who lingered too long. The man in the hood hadn't reappeared, but she felt him, a presence just out of sight. Thomas's warning looped in her mind: "You're being watched. Be careful." She didn't know what scared her more, the faceless watcher or the fact that Thomas knew about it. She considered going to the police. But what would she say? A stranger gave her money, and now she felt followed? The cash itself was a problema too much to explain, too suspicious. She hadn't spent it all. Most of it was stashed in a coffee can under the sink, her safety net. But it felt like a magnet, drawing eyes she couldn't see. She stopped going to the train station, avoiding the place where she'd met Thomas, but the city was too small to escape its own pulse. Every corner felt like a stage, every glance a spotlight. A week after the second letter, she saw him again, the man in the hood. It was dusk, and she was locking up the laundromat, Mia waiting inside with a coloring book. He stood across the street, motionless, his face obscured but his posture unmistakable. Leela's heart thudded as she fumbled with the keys, ushering Mia out and hurrying home. She didn't look back, but she felt his gaze, a weight on her spine. That night, she barely slept, the letter's words burning in her mind. She needed answers, but Thomas was a ghost. No address, no number, just a name and a handful of words that had upended her life. The next morning, she took a risk. She left Mia with a neighbor, a kind older woman who had taken a liking to the girl, and went to the library. The computers were old, the keyboards sticky, but they worked. She searched for Thomas Hope Street shelter, hoping for a lead. Nothing. She tried Thomas train station charity, then Thomas philanthropist. Still nothing. She sat back, frustrated, her fingers hovering over the keys. On a whim, she typed Thomas private investigator. A few profiles popped up, none local, none matching his description, but the idea stuck. His calm demeanor, the way he'd known about the shelter, the cryptic warning it fit. Was he tracking someone? Was she caught in something bigger? She left the library with more questions than answers, her steps quick as she headed to pick up Mia. The street was crowded, but she felt exposed, her skin prickling. At the neighbor's apartment, Mia was safe, happily eating a cookie, but Leela's relief was short-lived. Tucked into her mailbox was another envelope, her name in that same precise handwriting. Her hand shook as she opened it. The note was brief: "Meet me at the station, 8 p.m., platform 3, come alone. A. Thomas." Her first instinct was to ignore it, to take Mia and run, but where? The money had tied her to the city, to this fragile new start. And Thomas wasn't just a stranger anymore, he was her only clue to whatever was closing in. She spent the day wrestling with the decision, her mind a tug-of-war between fear and curiosity. By evening, she'd made up her mind. She left Mia with the neighbor again, promising to be back soon, and headed to the station. The platform was quieter than she remembered, the evening crowd thinning. She stood near platform 3, her coat pulled tight, her eyes scanning for Thomas. At 8:01, he appeared, stepping out of the shadows like he'd been there all along. His coat and cap were the same, but his face looked older in the dim light, lines etched deeper around his eyes. "Leela," he said, his voice low. "You came. Who are you?" She blurted, her voice sharper than she intended. "Why are you helping me? And who's watching me?" He glanced around, then gestured to a bench. They sat, the cold metal biting through her coat. "I'm someone who knows what it's like to be desperate," he said. "I saw you and Mia, and I wanted to help. But I didn't expect a broken bar complications." "What complications?" she pressed. "The man following me, the money." "What's going on?" Thomas sighed, rubbing his hands together. "I'm not just a passerby, Leela. I work for people who broken bar clean up messes, discreetly. The money I gave you wasn't money, it was meant to stay hidden, part of a job I was finishing. But I couldn't leave you stranded." Her stomach dropped. "So it's dirty money?" "Not exactly," he said. "It's complicated, but someone else wants it back. The man you've seen, he's not with me, but he's connected. He thinks you're part of a deal." Leela's breath caught. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice rising. "You dragged me into it." "I know," he said, and for the first time, he looked guilty. "I'm trying to fix it. That's why I'm here." "You need to leave the city, Leela. Take Mia, take the money, and go." "Tonight?" She stared at him, her mind racing. Leave everything she just started to build? But the alternative, he is staying, with a shadow trailing hero, was worse. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked. "You don't," he said simply. "But I'm the only one telling you the truth." She stood, her legs shaky. "If I go, this ends? No one follows us?" "I'll make sure of it," he said, but his eyes didn't meet hers. "Platform 5. There's a train in 20 minutes. Get on it. Don't look back." Leela walked away, her heart pounding. She didn't know if Thomas was her savior or her mistake, but she knew she had to protect Mia. She grabbed her daughter, packed their few belongings, and boarded the train, the money still in the coffee can. As the city lights faded, she held Mia close, whispering promises of a new start. But in the reflection of the window, she saw her own fear, and the nagging sense that Thomas's shadow would follow her, no matter how far she ran. The train's rhythm was an unsteady heartbeat, rocking Leela and Mia as they sped away from the city. Leela clutched the coffee can with the remaining money, a $1,800 now, after rent and necessities, its weight both a comfort and a curse. Mia slept in her lap, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, oblivious to the storm brewing in her mother's mind. The carriage was half empty, its fluorescent lights casting a sickly glow over the worn seats. Leela's eyes darted to every passenger, every movement, searching for the man in the hood or anyone who looked too interested. Thomas's warning echoed, "You're being watched, be careful." She didn't know if she was running from danger or toward it, but sitting still hadn't been an option. The station lights had faded behind them, but the city's grip lingered. Leela's mind replayed the meeting with Thomas on Platform 3. His cryptic words, the guilt in his eyes. He'd said he was fixing it. But what did that mean? Was he leading her to safety or setting her up? The money in the can felt heavier with every mile, its origins murky, tied to a job Thomas hadn't explained. She wanted to believe he was a good man caught in a bad situation, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not when Mia's safety was at stake. She glanced at the train's route map above the door. They were headed to a small town 3 hours north, a place she'd picked at random because it was far enough to feel like escape but close enough to afford. The shelter's address was scribbled on a scrap of paper in her pocket, a lead from a social worker who'd promised it was safe. Safe. The word felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. She adjusted Mia's blanket, her fingers brushing the girl's soft cheek. Whatever Thomas had pulled her into, she'd keep Mia out of it. That was her only certainty. The train slowed, pulling into a dimly lit station. Leela tensed, scanning the platform through the window. A few passengers shuffled off, their heads bowed against the cold. No one boarded. The doors hissed shut, and the train lurched forward again. She exhaled, but the relief was fleeting. A man at the far end of the carriage shifted, his face hidden by a newspaper. Was he watching? She couldn't tell. Her pulse quickened, and she pulled Mia closer, the coffee can digging into her side. An hour later, the train reached their stop, a small, windswept station with a single platform and a flickering sign. Leela gathered their bags, the coffee can tucked inside her coat, and carried a sleepy Mia into the night. The air was sharper here, smelling of pine and damp earth. The town was quiet, its main street lined with shuttered shops and a diner glowing faintly in the distance. The shelter was a 10-minute walk, according to the social worker's directions. Leela moved quickly, her boots crunching on gravel, her eyes scanning the shadows. The man in the hood didn't appear, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. The shelter was a converted house, its paint peeling but its windows warm with light. A woman named Ruth answered the door, her face kind but weary. "You must be Leela," she said, ushering them inside. The house smelled of soup and old wood, and Mia stirred, blinking at the new surroundings. Ruth showed them to a small room with bunk beds and a quilt that looked handmade. "Breakfast's at 7, she said. "You're safe here." There was that word again. Leela nodded, thanking her, and tucked Mia into the lower bunk. The girl fell asleep instantly, her rabbit clutched tight. Leela sat on the floor, the coffee can beside her, and pulled out Thomas's notes. The first, with the money, "No strings, stay safe." The second, "You're being watched, be careful." And the third, from the station, "Meet me at the station, 8 p.m., platform 3, come alone." She traced the handwriting, searching for clues in the loops and angles. Who was he? A private investigator, she'd guessed at the library, but that didn't explain the money or the danger. She needed answers, but she was alone in a strange town, with no way to reach him and no one to trust. The next morning, she woke to Mia's giggles. The girl was playing with another child in the shelter's common room, a rare moment of lightness. Leela sipped coffee, watching them, her mind churning. She couldn't stay here forever. The shelter was temporary, and the money wouldn't last. She needed a job, a plan, a way to disappear for good. But Thomas's warning hung over her, and the man in the hood felt like a ghost she couldn't outrun. She decided to call the social worker, hoping for leads on work or housing, but the shelter's phone was out of service. Ruth apologized, saying a storm had knocked out the lines. Leela's unease grew. It felt like the world was conspiring to keep her isolated. She took Mia to the diner for lunch, hoping to clear her head. The place was small, with checkered floors and a jukebox that didn't work. They split a grilled cheese sandwich, Mia chattering about the other kids at the shelter. Leela forced a smile, but her eyes kept drifting to the window, watching the street. A man passed by, his coat dark, his face obscured. Her stomach twisted. Was it him? She couldn't be sure. She paid quickly, leaving a crumpled bill on the counter, and hurried back to the shelter, Mia's hand tight in hers. That afternoon, she found a library a few blocks away, its shelves sparse but its computer working. She sat Mia down with a picture book and started searching again. This time, she tried broader terms: Thomas private security, Thomas money drop, even Thomas criminal case. Nothing matched, but a local news article caught her eye. It was from a week ago, about a robbery in the city, a briefcase of cash stolen from a private security firm. The article mentioned no names, but the sum was large, and the firm was known for handling sensitive transactions. Leela's heart raced. Was this Thomas's job? Had he given her stolen money? She printed the article, her hand shaking, and tucked it into her coat. If the money was tied to a crime, she was in deeper than she'd thought. She needed to get rid of it, but it was all she had. Back at the shelter, she hid the coffee can under the bunk, her mind spinning. She considered turning herself in, explaining everything, but who would believe her? A single mother with no connections, holding thousands in cash? She'd look guilty, and Mia could end up in foster care. The thought was unbearable. That night, a knock woke her. It was past midnight, the shelter silent. She crept to the door, her heart pounding, and peered through the peephole. No one. She opened it a crack, and an envelope slid to the floor. Her name, in Thomas's handwriting. She tore it open, her breath shallow. The note read, "They're closer than you think. Leave the money at the diner, under the jukebox. Tomorrow night, I'll handle the rest." Thomas. A chill ran through her. How did he know where she was? Had he followed her here? And who were they? She didn't sleep. At dawn, she packed their things, her decision made. She wouldn't wait for Thomas's plan. Whatever it was, she'd take Mia and the money and go farther, another state, maybe Canada. She didn't trust him anymore, not with his secrets and warnings. But as she stepped outside, a man was waiting across the street. Not the hooded man, but someone new, lean and sharp-eyed, his coat too clean for this dusty town. He didn't move, just watched. Leela froze, Mia's hand in hers. She turned back, pretending to check the door, her mind racing for a way out. The day dragged, every hour heavy with dread. She kept Mia inside, playing games to distract her, but her eyes stayed on the windows. The sharp-eyed man didn't reappear, but she felt his presence, like a predator circling. At dusk, she made a choice. She'd follow Thomas's instructions, not because she trusted him, but because she needed to end this. She took the coffee can to the diner, Mia at her side, and slid it under the jukebox when no one was looking. Her heart pounded as she walked away, expecting a hand on her shoulder, but none came. Back at the shelter, she waited, watching the clock. At 10 p.m., another envelope arrived, slipped under her door. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single ticket back to the city, a key, and a note. Apartment 4B, 112 Pine Street. It's yours. No one will follow you now. A. Thomas. She stared at the key, its metal cold in her palm. Was this freedom or a trap? She didn't know, but she was tired of running. The next morning, she boarded the train back to the city, Mia asleep in her arms. The apartment was really a small, clean place with a paid lease for 6 months. No strings, no catch, just as Thomas had promised. But as she settled Mia into a new bed, Leela couldn't shake the feeling that Thomas was still out there, watching, his shadow longer than she'd ever know. She locked the door, checked the windows, and held Mia close, whispering promises of safety she wasn't sure she could keep. The money was gone, the danger supposedly over, but Thomas's notes stayed with her, a reminder that some debts could never be repaid. The apartment at 112 Pine Street was a quiet haven, its walls bare but sturdy, the kind of place that felt like a fresh start. Leela stood at the window, watching the city hum below, its pulse slower here on the edge of downtown. Mia was sprawled on the floor, coloring a picture of a rabbit, her giggles a small light in the room. The key Thomas had left her fit perfectly, and the lease papers, delivered to the apartment's mailbox the day they arrived, confirmed 6 months paid in full, no landlord questions, no credit checks, just a clean slate. It was too perfect, and that perfection gnawed at Leela's nerves. She left the coffee can with the money under the diner's jukebox, as Thomas instructed, and no one had followed her back to the city. The sharp-eyed man, the hooded figure they'd vanished. But peace felt like a borrowed thing, liable to be reclaimed at any moment. Leela kept Thomas's notes hidden in a sock drawer, rereading them when Mia slept. The first, with the money, no strings, stay safe. The second, you're being watched, be careful. The third, from the station, meet me at the station, 8 p.m., platform 3, come alone. And the last, with the key, apartment 4B, 112 Pine Street. It's yours. No one will follow you now. Each note was a puzzle piece, but the picture they formed was incomplete. Who was Thomas? A private investigator, she'd guessed, or maybe a fixer for someone with power. The money, the apartment, the warnings they pointed to something bigger, a world of shadows she'd stumbled into at the train station that cold evening. She wanted to believe it was over, that leaving the money had cut the thread, but her gut told her otherwise. She found a job at a corner store 2 blocks away, stocking shelves and ringing up customers. The owner, a gruff man named Sal, didn't care about her past as long as she showed up on time. The pay was enough to cover food and bus fare, and with the apartment rent-free for now, Leela could breathe. She enrolled Mia in a nearby preschool, a small place with bright walls and a teacher who smiled at her daughter's endless questions. For the first time in years, Leela felt the edges of hope, but it was fragile, like a soap bubble waiting to pop. She checked the locks twice every night, scanned the street before leaving the apartment, and kept Mia close. The city was kinder here, but it was still the city, and she'd learned its lessons the hard way. A week after they settled in, a letter arrived. No return address, just her name in that familiar, precise handwriting. Her heart sank as she tore it open. Mia playing nearby with a toy truck. The note was short. Stay quiet, don't ask questions. You're safe as long as you do. A. Thomas. Her hand shook, the words reigniting her fear. She'd thought it was over, that the diner drop had ended it, but Thomas was still watching, still pulling strings. Stay quiet. About what? The money? The apartment? She crumpled the note, her jaw tight, and shoved it into her pocket. Mia looked up, sensing the shift. Mommy, you okay? She asked, her voice small. "I'm fine, baby," Leela lied, forcing a smile. Just thinking. She didn't want to scare Mia, but the note changed everything. Thomas wasn't just a benefactor, he was a tether, binding her to something she didn't understand. She considered running again, but where? The apartment was theirs, the first real home Mia had known. Leaving meant starting over with nothing, and she wasn't sure she had the strength. Instead, she decided to dig deeper. If Thomas wouldn't give her answers, she'd find them herself. The next day, after dropping Mia at preschool, Leela went to the library. The computers were faster here, the air less stale than the one in the small town. She started with the robbery she'd read about before, the briefcase of cash stolen from a private security firm. The article had been vague, but she searched for updates, typing city robbery security firm cash into the database. A new report popped up, dated 3 days ago. The firm, Blackthorn Security, had recovered part of the stolen funds, but a suspect was still at large. No names, no descriptions, just a mention of ongoing investigations and a photo of a nondescript office building. Her pulse quickened. Was Thomas tied to Blackthorn? Was he the suspect or hunting him? She tried Thomas Blackthorn Security, but nothing linked the name directly. She switched to private security firms city, pulling up a list of companies. Blackthorn's website was sleek, touting discreet solutions for high-value clients. She clicked through staff profiles, hoping for a face that matched Thomas, older, bearded, sharp-eyed, but found nothing. The site mentioned a CEO, Victor Hargrove, but his photo was a blank silhouette, his bio a single line about decades of experience. She scribbled the name on a napkin, her mind racing. Was Hargrove Thomas, or was Thomas working for him? She left the library, the napkin in her pocket, and picked up Mia. The preschool's bright chaos soothed her, Mia's chatter about finger painting a distraction. But as they walked home, Leela noticed a car parked across the street, a black sedan, its windows tinted. It didn't move, but she felt eyes on her. She quickened her pace, her hand tight around Mia's. At the apartment, she locked the door and checked the windows, her heart pounding. The sedan was gone when she looked again, but the unease stayed. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, the notes spread out, the napkin with Hargrove's name beside them. She needed to know who Thomas was, what he wanted, and why he kept finding her. The library searches weren't enough. She needed someone who knew the city's underbelly. She thought of Sal, her boss. He'd mentioned once, offhand, that he'd grown up in a rough neighborhood, knew people who know things. It was a risk, but she was out of options. The next morning, she approached Sal during a quiet shift. "I need a favor," she said, keeping her voice low. "I'm looking for someone. A man named Thomas, maybe tied to Blackthorn Security, or Victor Hargrove. You know anyone who could help?" Sal raised an eyebrow, wiping down the counter. "You in trouble, Leela?" "No," she lied. "Just a broken bar, curious about someone who helped me out." He studied her, then nodded. "I got a guy, Jimmy, used to run with some shady types. He'll cost you, but he's discreet. I'll give him a call." Leela thanked him, her stomach twisting. She didn't have much cash left, but answers were worth more than money now. 2 days later, Jimmy met her at the diner across from the store. He was wiry, with a scar above his eye and a voice like gravel. "Sal says you're looking for a Thomas," he said, sipping coffee. "Blackthorn's a big name. They don't mess around to hire rollers, dirty jobs." "What's your deal with this guy?" Leela hesitated, then told him the bare minimum. A stranger helped her, gave her money. Now she's getting notes. She left out the apartment, the warnings, the fear. Jimmy listened, his eyes narrow. "Sounds like a fixer," he said. "Blackthorn's got a few. They clean up messes, stolen cash, bad deals, you name it. This Thomas, he's probably freelance, working for Hargrove, but if he's leaving you notes, you're in his game now." "What game?" Leela asked, her voice tight. Jimmy shrugged. "Could be anything. Blackthorn's into corporate espionage, money laundering, you name it. If your guy's dropping cash, it's probably hot. And if he's warning you, someone else wants it back." He leaned closer. "You got the money?" "No," she said, too quickly. "I spent it." He smirked, not believing her. "Get rid of it. whatever's left. And don't trust your guy. Fixers don't do charity. He slid a number across the table. Call me if you need more. But it'll cost you. She nodded, pocketing the number, and left, her mind spinning. Jimmy's words confirmed her fears. The money was dirty, and Thomas wasn't her savior. That night, another letter arrived, slipped under her door. Her heart sank as she opened it. Stop digging, Leela. You're safe if you listen. A. Thomas. She froze, her breath shallow. How did he know she'd talked to Jimmy? Was he watching her, or was someone else? She checked the locks, her hand shaking, and pulled Mia into her bed. The girl's warmth her only anchor. The next day, she made a decision. She'd confront Thomas, force him to explain. She wrote a note: meet me at Pine Street Park, 7 p.m. tomorrow, no games. Lila, and left it in the mailbox, hoping he'd find it. She didn't know if he'd show, but she was done waiting. She spent the day preparing, telling Sal she'd need a few hours off. He didn't ask questions, just nodded, his eyes sharp with concern. At dusk, she took Mia to the neighbors, promising to be back soon, and headed to the park. It was small, with a rusty swing set and a bench under a flickering streetlight. She sat, her coat tight against the chill, and waited. At 7:03, Thomas appeared, his wool cap low, his coat blending into the shadows. He sat beside her, silent for a moment, his breath visible in the cold. You don't listen, he said, his voice low but not angry. I want answers, Leela said, her voice steady despite her fear. Who are you? Why me? And why am I still getting your notes? He sighed, rubbing his hands together. I'm a fixer, Leela. I move money, clean up problems. That cash I gave you was from a job gone wrong. I was supposed to deliver it, but I saw you and Mia, and a broken bar. I couldn't walk away. I thought I could keep you out of it. You didn't, she snapped. Someone's watching me. You're watching me. And now I'm in your mess. I know, he said, his eyes meeting hers. I'm trying to fix it. The money's gone now, right? You left it at the diner? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Good, he said. That should end it. The people after right if they don't care about you. They just want the cash. I've pointed them elsewhere. Who's Victor Hargrove? She asked, testing him. His jaw tightened, just for a second. My boss. He runs Blackthorn. He's not your problem. Then why am I still getting your notes? She pressed. Because I'm not perfect, he said, his voice rough. I'm making sure you're safe. But you need to stop asking questions. People like Hargrove, they don't like loose ends. Leela stood, her hands clenched. I'm not your loose end. Leave us alone, Thomas. No more notes. No more games. We're done. He looked at her, his eyes unreadable. I hope so, he said. For your sake. He stood and walked away, disappearing into the dark. Leela went home, her heart pounding. She checked on Mia, sleeping soundly, and locked the door. No more notes came. The sedan didn't reappear. Weeks passed, then months. The apartment became home, Mia's laughter filling it. Leela kept her job, saved what she could, and watched the street less. But she never forgot Thomas, his shadow lingering in the corners of her mind. The notes stayed in the drawer, a reminder that safety was fragile, and some strangers, no matter how kind, carried secrets too heavy to share.